Well, break time is officially over. We always take a little bit of a break in the garden in August, kind of just focus on our cover crops, rehabbing our soils for fall. And now that we're at the end of August, beginning of September here, it's time for us to start getting some transplants going. It's time to start getting these plots ready for fall planting, which will happen, in about a month or so. So today we're gonna start getting one of those plots ready right behind me here. So today we're going to be taking care of this plot of iron clay peas here. This particular plot in the dream garden is one where I didn't plant any fall crops last year. I had peppers and eggplants here that we let go to the first frost. So this is going to be a primary plot for a lot of fall production this year. These peas here still haven't bloomed, but they need to be taken down because some of them got blown down by the wind. That opened up some spaces for some weeds to start coming in there, as you see right there. So we need to go ahead and mow this down, and then we're going to tarp it and talk about the importance of that when you've got a little bit of time between when your plot has been mowed or tilled and when you're actually going to plant. Now, if you didn't have some weeds popping up in here, if you didn't have winds and heavy rains that kind of knocked some of it down and allowed the weeds to pop through, you probably could just, let this thing ride right up until you got time to plant for fall, cut it down, till it in, you'd be good to go. In our case, we've got weeds popping up through there, but we also want to kind of give ourselves a nice low weed seed bank before we start with fall planting there. And that tarp is going to help us do that. It's going to help kill any of those weed seeds that are on the surface there. And we'll talk more about that when we do the tarp. Let me go grab the push mower. I'm going to mow this probably a couple times, mow it on high, drop it down low, scalp it, and then we'll tarp it. All right. Well, I was going to mow it twice, but I think one time it's going to be good enough. Still some stems and stuff sticking out a little bit there, but that tarp will knock them back and they'll dry up and die pretty quick as soon as we put that tarp on there. As I always mention, when you're doing this, you don't want to blow this leaf material, this organic matter, all over the place. You just want to chop and drop it, whatever kind of mower you've got that will allow you to do that, or weed eater or whatever. But you want to take that green material and put it on top of the soil, not blowing it away from your garden plot. So I'm gonna grab a 30 by 40 tarp, a few bricks. Let's get this tarp down. All right, we got the tarp on. We can still see it kind of poking up a little bit there in the middle where some of those stems are that weren't cut all the way down to the ground. But as this tarp does its magic out here in this hot weather, kills that stuff off in there, this thing will suction to the ground, be nice and flat here in just a few days. Won't take long at all. Now, we have two different sizes of tarps on our website. We have a 40 by 50 and then we have a 30 by 40, which is what this is here. And my plots here in the dream garden are 30 by 35. So it works out almost perfect. I could cut this off here, trim it off a little bit, but it works for some of my other plots not in the dream garden. So for these, I just fold that extra 5 foot over there. And we do include sandbags with these when you purchase one. Well, I have a bunch of bricks laying around. I didn't have any sand to fill any bags. I had a bunch of old bricks laying around, so that's just what I use to keep it pinned down. Sandbags are nice because it doesn't take as many of those. They're heavier than the bricks are. But either way, you want something to hold it down good on the edges there. And once this thing kind of flattens to the ground, you really ain't got to worry about it going nowhere. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this process here, this tarping process behind me. So this process we're doing here with the black tarp is a process called occultation. And so the concept here is you put the black tarp on there. It's going to kill any living material there, any weeds that are living there on the surface that are rooted. But it's also going to create a moist environment there because you're trapping in all that moisture that's in the soil. We've got, you know, a ½ inch of rain last night, so a good bit of moisture there. It's going to force any weed seeds on the surface to germinate. But as soon as they germinate, they're going to die because there's no light there, because that black tarp is blocking out all the light. And this is a great way to create what we call a stale weed seed bed or stale weed seed bank before planting. Now you'll also hear the word solarization thrown around a little bit when it comes to tarping. And solarization, as opposed to occultation, which is with the black tarp, solarization is with a clear tarp. And so you take a clear tarp, you put on there, and the premise there is that you create a greenhouse effect. So the sun is penetrating through there, but a lot of those gases can't escape. And it's just like a little mini greenhouse right on top of your soil. Now that will also give you a nice stale weed seed bank. A lot of people use that technique to kind of sterilize their soil because supposedly that will heat up your soil more than this black tarp will. This black tarp here won't really burn up a lot of your you know, living organisms, your soil biota, all that. You don't have to worry about that with the black tarp. With a clear tarp, a lot of people will use that intentionally if they've got some, you know, issues with their soil and they want to just kind of just fry it all and start fresh and anew. So that's the difference between the black tarp and the clear tarp. I've never really tried the solarization with the clear tarp. I kind of understand the principle behind it. And I really like the black tarp here. It's worked well for us. I've used it for a couple years. And there's several different applications where you can use this, and I'll talk about those. So the first application is exactly what we did today here. We had a cover crop planted. We went and mowed that cover crop. We still have about a month before we're going to plant anything in this plot, and we're to use that tarp as a placeholder. Okay, so that tarp is going to make sure this plot doesn't get grown up. It's going to make it pretty much maintenance free. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to, you know, if we didn't have the tarp and we mowed that, we probably have to come out here and cultivate this at least once a week to keep it from getting grown up. So the tarp is going to just become a placeholder for us, make it nice and maintenance free. And so we don't have to worry about new weeds popping up on this tarp. Also going to give us that stale weed seed bank. It's going to kill any of the weed seeds on the surface there while we're waiting to plant this area. So it works great as a placeholder like that. And you could leave it on there way more than a month. You know, if you're a type of person that struggles with your garden getting overgrown between, say, the spring garden and maybe you don't do a fall garden, maybe it's, you know, all the way the next spring it gets overgrown, or maybe it gets overgrown on you between spring and fall, and you just don't have the time or don't want to take the effort to really keep it clean over that time period, the tarp is a great way to go. You just put the tarp on top of the garden, leave it there. You don't have to worry about it becoming real weedy, and over time you're going to have a nice weed-free garden that's a lot easier to manage. So it works good as a placeholder like that. It also works good in no-till situations. So if you're doing a no-till garden where you don't want to cultivate, the tarp is a great way to terminate cover crops, kind of like we did today, so you don't have to come in there and cultivate and turn them into the soil. Now this is a little bit of a longer process than if you were to till it. Now here what I'm going to do is a bit of a no-till situation. My intentions are to pull back this tarp in, I'd say, 2 to 3 weeks, and I'm going to dump a heavy load of gin trash compost on it. And I'm planning on putting, I'd say, 2 to 3 inches of compost on it. And I want to put the tarp back on it. And hopefully, after I put the tarp back on in a couple more weeks, I have transplants ready to go in the ground. I can lay drip tape. I can cover that drip tape and plant right on top of it. and we can leave all those iron clay pea roots intact, you know, because they are nitrogen fixers. We want to leave them there, leave all that nitrogen in place. So that's what we're going to try to do here. I think it should work pretty well, but we'll just have to see. The final good way to use a tarp like this is to establish a new garden area, or just say you got a garden that's got a lot of nut grass in it, maybe a lot of Bermuda grass in it, or you're starting a garden plot in an area that's got a lot of nut grass and Bermuda grass. You can use what I call the tarp and till technique to really get that area nice and clean and weed free. Nut grass is tough, Bermuda grass is tough because they have all those kind of underground rhizomes that are hard to eliminate. But I've practiced this myself. I've tried it in certain spots on other farms. So what you do with this tarp and till technique is you want to first go in there and cultivate the area where your garden plot is going to be. Put the tarp on it. Let it sit for 2 to 4 weeks. It will depend on the time you let it sit, the time it takes to kind of burn everything there. Will depend a lot on the outside temperatures. This thing works a lot faster this time of year than it does in the cool season. So leave the tarp on there a couple weeks, pull the tarp back, till it again. That's going to stir up any of those rhizomes that are down there. Put the tarp back on for a few weeks, till it again. And if you do this about 4 or 5 times, even if you've got things that are stubborn like nutgrass and Bermuda grass, you will get rid of them and you'll have a nice weed-free garden plot. Now I will say this, one of the disadvantages about the tarp is that it will dry out your soil over time because the breakdown of that organic matter underneath that tarp, all the biological activity that's going on is consuming water. So that is going to dry out your soil over time, and it's not getting any water from the sky because it's covered. So when you do pull it back from time to time, it's not a terrible idea to run a little overhead sprinkler and wet that soil down. That is also going to help the process of getting those weed seeds to germinate, and then they'll die because they don't have any light. Now for this tarping technique to be effective, the one main thing you got to remember is that you don't want to pull the tarp off, till the area, and then plant. Because each time you till or you cultivate, you're stirring up weed seeds from deep down below, bringing them to the top, to the surface there. So that's not what you want to do. You want to pull off the tarp and it be just ready to plant right then. So if your soil does need cultivating, maybe you know it's a little chunky, maybe there's still some organic debris in there, you can't plant in there as easy as you like. If you know it's going to need cultivating before planting, plan ahead with that. Cultivate it a couple weeks before you want to plant, put the tarp back on it and leave it there as a placeholder. Then when you pull the tarp off, you can plant and you'll have a nice weed-free zone. But if you cultivate it, right, if you pull the tarp off and then plant, you know, all those weed seeds you stirred up are going to now be able to thrive because they can germinate and they'll have sunlight. So just plan ahead a little bit with your tarping. The only big disadvantage besides, you know, having to add a little water to these plots if you tarp them for a long time is down here in the south, you will get a few fire ants every now and then that like to kind of snuggle up underneath that tarp. If you do the kind of tarp and till technique I've talked about, that's not as big of an issue. Fire ants don't like disturbance. If you disturb an area even a little bit, they'll usually move away. So just kind of be aware of that. With the fire ants, you could also, we have a fire ant solution with the spinosad in it on our site. You could use that. You could put some of that down underneath the tarp, kind of take care of that issue as well. Those are the really only 2 disadvantages. There's lots and lots of advantages to using a tarp, and if you've never used one, I would highly recommend giving it a try, and it will go a long way to making your garden so much easier to use and to grow food in, because you won't be fighting the weeds so much. You'll be able to go out there and just concentrate on your plants, harvesting, and just growing clean, healthy food. I'll put some links below to both of our silage tarp options so you can check those out, whether you want to use it as a placeholder for just a month or so like this, if you want to use it as a placeholder all the way until next spring, or use it to create a nice new weed-free garden spot. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give me a big thumbs up. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and hit that bell button so you get notified every time we come out with a new video. And if you enjoyed this one, check out these other 2 tarping videos here we've done in the past. I think you'll really enjoy those as well. We'll see you next time.